There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that builds in relationships where you're always the one saying yes. Yes to things that drain you. Yes to dynamics that feel off. Yes, even when everything in your body is screaming no. But here's the truth. No one teaches you. Saying no isn't rejection. It's not cruelty. It's how you stay connected to yourself while still loving someone else. And if you never learn to say it, you'll lose more than just your energy. You'll lose yourself. In the beginning, it feels easier to say yes. Yes to their needs. Yes to their timelines. Yes to their moods, their habits, their wants. You agree even when it stretches you thin, even when something inside you whispers that this isn't sustainable. Why? Because you don't want to seem difficult. Because you're afraid of rejection. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught that love means self-sacrifice. But without boundaries, there is no real intimacy, only performance. And the cost of constant yes is quiet, slow erosion of energy, of clarity, of self. Boundaries are not walls. They're not weapons. They're the architecture of healthy relationships. They are the invisible lines that protect your inner life, your time, your space, your emotions, from being consumed by someone else's expectations. Without them, you don't have connection. You have enmeshment. You don't have closeness. You have collapse. Think of boundaries as the rules of engagement for love. They say, here's how I can show up for you, and here's what I need in order to do that honestly. They're not ultimatums. They're invitations to mutual respect. Because love without respect isn't love. It's compliance. There are many types of boundaries, and each one matters. Emotional boundaries mean being able to say, I'm not in a place to talk about this right now, without guilt. Physical boundaries mean knowing what kind of touch feels safe and what doesn't, even in long-term partnerships. Time boundaries mean protecting your energy, saying no to plans you don't want to make, or carving out space for solitude without feeling selfish. And yet, most people struggle to set them, not because they don't know what they need, but because they're afraid of what the boundary might cost. Will they get angry? Will they leave? Will they say I've changed? And maybe they will. But what's the alternative? Silencing your truth for temporary peace? Disappearing into the relationship so that you won't be left? That's not love. That's self-abandonment. Boundaries actually create room for love. When you know where you end and the other begins, you can engage with presence, not resentment. When you protect your space, your yes becomes more honest. You're not agreeing out of fear or obligation. You're choosing from a place of clarity. That's the kind of yes that means something. Without boundaries, resentment festers. You start keeping score. You say yes, but inside you're angry. You give time, but secretly feel depleted. You feel like you're losing yourself, and then blame them for taking too much. But they can't read your mind. And the truth is, people often treat you the way you allow them to. That doesn't make it your fault, but it does mean you have power, more than you think. Setting boundaries is an act of love, not just for yourself, but for the relationship, because it creates clarity. It shows the other person how to love you well. It invites them into a space of mutual care, where both people get to have needs, and both people get to speak honestly. The philosopher Alain de Botton once said that one of the kindest things we can do in a relationship is tell the other person what we need, clearly and without shame. And yet, most of us hesitate. We fear we'll seem needy, or controlling, or too much. But withholding boundaries doesn't make you more lovable. It just makes you invisible. Real love doesn't require your silence. It doesn't demand that you shrink. It wants your full presence. And that presence is only possible when you feel safe enough to be real. And that starts with the smallest word, a sacred word, a difficult word. No. It's strange how one syllable can carry so much weight. For many of us, no feels like a rejection, not just of the request, but of the person making it. We worry it will make us seem cold, unloving, selfish. So, we default to yes, even when it hurts, even when it chips away at our sense of truth. But no is not a weapon. It's a tool, one that helps you honor your own limits and preserve your integrity in a relationship. Saying no is how you protect your yes, because when everything becomes a yes, when you give it freely, automatically, without pause, it loses its meaning. It becomes performative, not intentional. You're not saying yes because it aligns with your needs or values. You're saying it to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, to stay likable. And over time, this builds quiet resentment. You become emotionally overdrawn, with nothing left to offer, not out of cruelty, but depletion. One of the reasons we struggle with no is fear. Fear of disappointing someone, fear of being abandoned, fear of being seen as difficult, especially if you grew up in an environment where love felt conditional, where pleasing others was the only way to stay safe or accepted. Then saying no can feel dangerous, even shameful. But that fear is rooted in an old survival strategy, not in present truth. You're not that child anymore. You don't have to say yes to be loved. No becomes an act of reparenting, of telling yourself, my needs matter too. My discomfort is a signal, not a flaw. I don't have to disappear to be worthy of connection. Start by noticing the moments when your body hesitates, the pause, the breath you hold, the flicker of unease in your stomach. These are signals, not to be ignored, but listened to. You don't need to justify your no with an elaborate excuse. You don't have to prove your worth by over-explaining. A boundary doesn't require a backstory. It just requires clarity. And yet, it helps to practice, especially if the word feels foreign on your tongue. Start with small numbers, low-stakes moments. Decline an invitation you don't want to attend. Ask for space when you need it. Turn down a favor that feels too heavy. Each time you do, you reinforce something powerful, the belief that you can disappoint someone and survive. Because the truth is, saying yes when you mean no is a form of self-betrayal. It seems harmless in the moment. It keeps things smooth on the surface. But underneath, it's a slow drain on your emotional health. You feel unseen, not because others refuse to see you, but because you've hidden your truth behind politeness, behind approval seeking, behind fear, and that internal split, the distance between what you feel and what you express, becomes a breeding ground for anxiety, burnout, and even resentment. You start to feel like a ghost in your own life, like your needs only matter when everyone else's are met first. This is especially true in intimate relationships. When you love someone, you want to give, you want to show up. But if that love constantly demands that you override your own needs, it's not love, it's martyrdom. And martyrdom breeds bitterness, not because you gave, but because you gave yourself away. The irony is, most relationships grow stronger when you say no, not weaker, because it creates a relationship dynamic rooted in honesty. Your partner may not always like your no, but if they respect it, that's a sign of something healthy. And if they don't, that's information too. Boundaries don't control other people, they reveal them. The psychologist Gabor Mate once said, when we say yes to others, we must be careful not to say no to ourselves. And that's the essence of emotional maturity, knowing how to hold both, care for the other and care for the self, without collapsing one into the other. Saying no doesn't mean you're pushing someone away. It means you're finally letting yourself stay. Saying no is powerful, but learning how to communicate it with clarity, with calm, with compassion is what transforms it from a defensive wall into a bridge. Because boundaries aren't just something you set, they're something you have to live. And living them means learning how to talk about them, especially with the people closest to you. The first step is to stop apologizing for your needs. You don't need to sound guilty for wanting space, time, rest, or autonomy. You don't need to present your no like a favor you wish you didn't have to ask for. Practice using I statements, not as a script, but as a way of owning your experience. Instead of, you're always asking too much of me, say, I feel overwhelmed when I don't have time to recharge. Instead of, you make me uncomfortable, say, I'm not comfortable with that, and I need some space around it. The difference is subtle, but it matters. One blames, the other communicates. Still, even the clearest boundaries can be met with resistance, especially if you've gone a long time without setting them. When you start to assert yourself in new ways, the people who benefited from your silence may push back. They might say you've changed, that you're being cold, that you're overreacting, and maybe you'll second-guess yourself, especially if they seem hurt or confused. But discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It often means you're doing something new, something necessary. The key is consistency. Boundaries that are set and then quickly abandoned teach people to wait you out. But when you remain firm, not rigid, not aggressive, just steady, you signal that your no is real. And over time, those who care about you will adjust. Those who can't may fall away. And though that may hurt, it's also clarifying. Boundaries don't just protect your energy. They reveal who's really in your corner. The goal here isn't to dominate or control. It's to create relationships built on mutual respect, where both people feel safe, seen, and free to be themselves. That means not every no has to be absolute. Relationships are, by nature, collaborative. There's room for negotiation, for compromise, for finding that middle ground where both people feel heard. But compromise should never mean self-erasure. If you find yourself constantly folding just to keep the peace, it's not a compromise. It's quiet surrender. And paradoxically, the more you speak your boundaries, the more trust you build. Because boundaries create clarity, and clarity creates safety. Your partner no longer has to guess what's okay or not okay. You don't have to hope they'll magically intuit what you need. You're both operating from honesty, not assumption. That honesty deepens the connection, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Think of it this way. A relationship without boundaries might look peaceful on the surface, but underneath, there's usually resentment, miscommunication, and emotional distance. A relationship with boundaries might have more friction at first, but that friction is real. It's honest, and it's fertile ground for real intimacy. Healthy boundaries also create balance. They remind you that you're not responsible for managing someone else's emotions, just your own. You're allowed to prioritize your needs without becoming the villain in someone else's story. You're allowed to say no without a 10-point explanation. You're allowed to protect your peace, even when it disappoints someone you love. But this takes practice. Start small. Identify what matters most to you, your time, your energy, your values. Ask yourself, where do I feel most drained? Where do I consistently override my discomfort to avoid tension? Those are usually the places where boundaries need to be built. Set one. Communicate it. Hold it. Let the world adjust. And through it all, return to self-care. Not the glamorous kind, but the quiet, steady kind. The kind where you listen to yourself, where you rest without guilt, where you check in and ask, am I being honest with myself in this relationship? Because when you're connected to yourself, you're no longer afraid of losing others. You're no longer desperate to please. You're no longer afraid of the word no. In fact, you start to see it for what it truly is, a doorway, not to distance, but to depth, not to disconnection, but to a kind of love that includes you in it.